There's a symptom of trauma that's common in non-traumatized people too, but it's almost universal for people who were abused and neglected as kids, and it's a haunting sense of loneliness. It can make any effort to connect with people extra stressful for us. And this is not just an emotional hurt. Abuse and neglect may have caused an injury to your ability to connect with other people. If this happened to you, you were robbed of what every person rightfully deserves, to be well treasured and lovingly guided into the realm of human connection that's all around you, and on which the richness of your life and even your survival may in fact depend. All through your life, the people who become your friends and co-workers and loved ones, and your ability to connect with them will likely be the single biggest factor in how your life turns out. Thankfully, no matter where you begin or how old you are right now, you are capable of increasing your capacity to love and connect with other people. You'll say it's too hard, and yes, it's hard, but healing is possible. Remember, there's nothing wrong with you. You have a common side effect of growing up with trauma, and it's not your fault. We now know that abuse and neglect early in life can literally change your brain and restrict the normal cognitive processes that enable you to seek out and connect with good, appropriate people to bring into your life, to know instinctively how to interact with them, and to detect red flags so that you can avoid people who should not be let into your life. As I say this, I know a lot of you will be welling up with emotion, and this loss of the ability to feel like you're a full-fledged part of life is the most tragic part of childhood PTSD. To be capable of love, but not to be able to sustain a normal, loving relationship is a devastating price to pay for what happened to you. But you can absolutely make progress in this area if you're intentional about it. If you just kind of leave it to chance and hope you'll figure out love and friendship later in your life when you have more time, or maybe when the right person comes along, I'll be honest with you, it's not likely to get better. It turns out that having and growing our connections with other people is one of the most powerful ways that we can heal our trauma. There's a large body of research emerging that shows that loving relationships actually help us heal not just our bodies and not just our emotions, but even our telomeres. And those are the little caps on the strands of DNA in all of our cells that protect us from disease and slow down our aging. Connection is vital to life, is what this shows. And yes, some feelings of loneliness and disconnection are universal experiences for everyone. At least a little. But with CPTSD, it can kind of take over your life and drain you of anything good. And this has everything to do with brain and emotional dysregulation, something very common for people who grow up with trauma that can make connection really difficult. But connection is related to re-regulation, which makes change in this part of ourselves possible. I have a whole playlist about dysregulation if you want to learn more about that. Learning to recognize it and get re-regulated is the foundation of everything I teach. And of course, there's my dysregulation boot camp if you want to take a deep dive into that subject. There's a link to my courses in the description section below this video and all my videos. But for now, put really simply, dysregulation is a tendency common in traumatized people and in everyone to some degree to experience nervous system bumpiness when they're under stress. You might feel panicked or overreactive or discombobulated or numb. Being prone to slipping into a dysregulated state can seriously challenge your ability to connect. It's very common for people with childhood trauma. It's hard to read nonverbal cues, for example. It's hard to express emotions in a way that doesn't push people away. And it's hard to handle hurts when your brain and emotions aren't quite aligned with what's happening in front of you. Dysregulation prevents connections. It puts pressure on connections and it breaks connections. Re-regulation puts you in a place where you can learn and grow and maintain and repair connections. If you've never learned to intentionally get re-regulated, then getting the skills to do it is going to be life-changing for you. I also have a free course where you can get started on that called The Daily Practice, and the links to that are below underneath my videos as well. For me, it's been a long process. I was born to loving parents whose alcoholism and addictions set the stage for abuse and neglect for my siblings and me, starting when we were really small. Now, the violence in our house eventually stopped, and there were definitely good things about my family, but the neglect never ended. And I grew up feeling a grinding sense of loneliness and shame and isolation. And I used to think it was me, maybe because we were poor, maybe because our house was so messy, or maybe I used to think I was some kind of unlikable person. And I mean, trauma can make kids kind of edgy. I think I was a pretty good kid. I was really stressed out all the time about all of the arguing and the tension in the house, and by middle school, I had to fend for myself to scrounge up lunch money or clothes or money for the laundromat even. I spent a lot of energy hiding our home situation from other people and hiding all the creepy encounters with potential abusers outside the family, the kind who tends to shadow kids who aren't supervised and who don't have clear boundaries, if you know what I'm talking about. But despite all this, I did okay in my young adulthood. I was a good student, and I was creative and responsible, and I made friends with interesting and exciting people, and I had my first long-term relationship. But I couldn't sustain the good things in my life. And by the time I was 30, I'd quit the job and left the boyfriend, not because I was moving forward, but because I was falling apart. And that core loneliness was getting louder and louder. It made me selfish, and it made me mean because I honestly thought the emptiness inside was caused by some failing in the people around me. So of course people didn't want to deal with my anger and unreasonableness and blame, and they left. I tried to change. I was in therapy for years and eventually multiple times every week, but the more I talked about it, the worse I got. And the worse I got, the more scared and desperate I became. And I thought I was the only person in the world who struggled like that, even in therapy. There was no name back then for what was going on, but there is now. It's complex PTSD from childhood trauma. This is the kind of post-traumatic stress that comes from chronic, ongoing stress. This can happen at any stage of life, but CPTSD develops most commonly in kids who are abused and neglected. So you'll hear me say childhood PTSD, complex PTSD, almost interchangeably. And I always have to apologize because I know it drives some people crazy. They're like, Anna, the C is for complex, not childhood. And I do know that. And while complex PTSD is the technical term, childhood PTSD makes instinctive sense to anyone watching. You know what that is, especially if you have it. It feels good to have a name for it. And now we do. So that was a giant aha moment in my own healing, finding out that childhood PTSD is a thing and it's not just me. And the second crucial turning point for me was when I learned to heal the number one symptom caused by my CPTSD. And it's another thing there was no word for back then, and that's dysregulation. Now, if you've taken any of my other courses, you've probably heard the story of how I learned the writing and meditation techniques that were shown to me in 1994, and that, to my incredible surprise, calmed my stressed and hurting mind way, way down and brought my thoughts and emotions into order. What a game changer. And again, you can find that free course that I used to get there on the free tools page of my website or link down below this video. I'm always pointing down below in the description section. But I learned these techniques and very quickly became calm and clear. I sure wasn't expecting that to happen. Finally, I could see what was going wrong in my life, as well as what's really good about me, underneath all the guilt and the self-attack I used to direct at myself back then. Now, maybe you feel anxious around people. Maybe past hurts have made it hard to trust. Maybe the shame and invalidation you're carrying from your childhood make it impossible to just be yourself with other people. And you're in fear all the time that you'll say the wrong thing, or that they don't like you, or that you don't belong. And you think everyone else belongs, but never me. I know that feeling. I spent so much of my life feeling like this, drowning in fear, on fire with resentment, talking about it, trying to get other people to understand how wronged I was, how terrible were the things that happened to me, how unjustly excluded and overlooked I was. And all these things were true at one time, and it felt like talking about it should deliver some kind of healing breakthrough. We all have to talk about painful things sometime, but as you probably have found out too, it doesn't automatically heal the disconnection. That, I've learned, involves building something you might call connection muscles, emotionally, mentally, and neurologically. Rather than trying to run away from people or change them or hate them or cling to them for dear life, I learned to shift my focus onto noticing and calming my triggers. And that's a lot of what I teach in my videos and my programs. If you don't get triggered, all the other things that you do when you're triggered, they're not happening. You can choose to do something different when you have calmed your triggers. You can gracefully handle some of life's tricky people or situations, which is stuff most of us did not learn from our parents. And then we had to blunder along all this time with a combination of faking it, fighting people, running away from them. You can learn how to stay kind when you feel like lashing out, to care for yourself when you feel threatened or abandoned, or to deal with conflicts with the courage and dignity that were drained out of you by trauma in the past. It's amazing how life opens up when you can be at ease with yourself and confident that whatever happens, you'll know how to deal with it. You don't have to be all better before you start working on connecting. You need connection to get better right now, where you are, even if that's at the very beginning of your recovery from early trauma. You need it because all the other work that you'll do to heal, the brain healing, learning your triggers and how they cut you off from people, none of this can be accomplished in isolation. You were born to be connected. CPTSD can block you from finding any connection, and it can block you from experiencing the connections that are right in front of you. But you can heal. Your healing gets a huge boost when you're making happy progress in your ability to connect with other people, whether it's with a partner or your kids, your friends, your family, or just strangers you meet on the street. You can learn this in small, brave steps. It's not always easy, but as you take little steps forward, it starts to feel good. The change begins when you believe you can do it. You can heal. You can change your life. You can change.